To call this meeting to order at 6:01. We'll start our meeting with a patriotic exercise led by Emily Wong, who's a 5th grader at Franklin.
It's shutting down.
Unfortunately, President Kendall, I do not see the student on here.
Okay.
Ms. Tiktakis, I think I see her under the attendees.
I see her, just promoted.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi.
Emily.
Hi, Emily, welcome.
Hi.
You can go ahead, and you want to lead us in the pledge, but do you want to tell us about which school you're from and how the school year is going?
So I'm honored to represent Franklin. I love my school because it's a wonderful community of friends, teachers, and wonderful staff. We have lots of fun at school. I love to read. And in class, we're reading Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim and Where the Red Fern Grows. I really like them and I highly recommend them. I'm really enjoying that in school right now. I also love to write and share my ideas. But outside of school, I love playing softball on my violin. And it's my pleasure to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was awesome. Thank you, Emily. And I'm so glad that they're still reading Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. That was one of my favorites when I was in school. That's a great one.
Yeah, my teacher said that it was still around when she was reading it.
It's true. And I'm even older than she is. So that's definitely true. Thank you so much, Emily. Wonderful job. You're very well spoken.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Emily.
Thank you.
All right. So we're moving on to item number 4, the approval of the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve our agenda for tonight?
Roll call first, President.
Oh, you're right. Item number 3, roll call. Okay, Trustee Wong,
Here.
Trustee Reed,
Here.
Trustee Mudd,
Here.
Trustee Sarpangal,
Here.
and Trustee Kendall here. Okay, now item number 4. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Kate. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Florence. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, all in favor. Okay, let's move on to item number 5, which is approval of the minutes from August 10 and August 12, 2021. Does anyone have any changes to make, or would we like to have a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from August 10th and August 12th.
Thank you, Kate. And do we have a second? I'll second it. Yeah, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay, so now we're on item number 6, public statements related to agenda items. And I'm going to read from this section. So public statements. At the discretion of the Board of Trustees, the public may address the board on non-agenda topics and/or agenda items. If you choose to make a public statement, you will need to complete and submit the district's Google form for public statements. This can be found on the district website, www.burlingameschools.org. Click on District, click on Board of Trustees, and the link to the form is on the right-hand side. The moderator will call on you. Please note that comments are limited to 3 minutes. The board president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public presentation depending on the topic and the number of persons wishing to be heard. If your comment is on an item that is not on the agenda, then you will be asked to speak during the public statements related to non-agenda topics at the end of the meeting. If your comment is on an item that is on the agenda, then you will be called on to speak at the time of the agenda item. All right. So that now we have item number 7, which is our union statement. Do we have someone representing the union to speak? Hi.
Mute. There we go. Hi, good evening. I'm so happy to be speaking to you tonight. I just wanted to spend these few minutes highlighting the incredible work being done in the classroom by all the educators in the Burlingame School District. Every educator is working to provide a quality educational experience and program for all the children in the district. These programs continue to be rich academically and provide a foundation to support the social and emotional needs of every student. They are also building community within their classroom and amongst the new and familiar grade level partners. This professionalism has persisted in the Burlingame School District, even while there are a record number of split classes and teachers are actively rotating their attendance to help meet the needs of the combination class teachers and the individual students, while implementing 2 new rigorous curriculums in language arts and social studies. While we are still in a pandemic and social distancing and hand washing and mask wearing and rapid COVID tests dominate every day, and the teachers still have families and fears of their own to cope with, while performing extra yard duties, while being required to complete an extra 6 hours of online staff development, while teaching individual PE classes with up to 72 students, and while training and supporting all the new educators on staff. The list goes on, but again, this is another example of how the educators in the Burlingame School District have risen and are providing an outstanding educational experience for the children in the face of excessive stress and pressure. If ever the Burlingame School District teachers need your support, it's right now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian. All right, now we'll move on to the next statement, which is the statement of the principal.
One moment, President Kendall, while
right.
we unmute Jude Lawrence.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Jude.
Good evening, hi Elizabeth. Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here at the beginning of yet another interesting school year. So I think we as a principal group just want to acknowledge that this start of this year was not what we were all hoping for. The continuation of the pandemic, meaning we still have restrictions in place on campus, and we as a principal group still feel the weight of responsibility for keeping our whole community safe. However, we are very proud of the way that we've begun our school year, and it has been a successful start to the school year, as Brian just said. What have we achieved so far? Well, we've reviewed and reinstated COVID protocols on campus, taking a cautious approach as safety is still our priority. We really appreciate our community's continuing support of our masking protocols, their willingness to follow guidelines on quarantining, on travel, reporting symptoms, keeping symptomatic children at home, precautionary testing, and walking alongside us as we continue to work incredibly hard to keep our students, staff, and families safe. That really is still our #1 priority. If you'd have told me 2 years ago that when I walked into Franklin that I would be adding medical scientist, public health expert, health logistics coordinator to the hats that I wear, I really wouldn't have believed you. Neither would many of my colleagues. These hats that all members of our staff, our school are wearing, the teachers, the staff and admin alike, are heavy and sometimes not super comfortable. And I think we can all say, and we need to acknowledge that we're all wearing them well, and we're certainly working incredibly hard to take on all of the tasks that we're being set. We haven't seen any on-campus spread of COVID, and the monitoring testing that's been conducted on site so far has been successful. The learning curve was steep for the on-campus testing, but both staff and families have stepped up in a collaborative process to make it work efficiently and effectively. We appreciate the increased participation in testing and encourage our communities to continue in weekly surveillance testing, which has been spearheaded by our PTA and parents. as well as to be prepared for on-site testing should it be needed by signing up for the Binax testing. I'd like to also acknowledge the Binax testing teams for taking on that additional responsibility, which is yet another thing that we're doing on campuses to keep our students and our wider community safe. What else? Well, as Brian said, we've introduced 2 new curricula, something I don't think has happened in this district for a while, maybe ever. Have we ever done 2 at once? I'm not sure. So our teachers have been diving into the materials, and although there were some delays in getting all the resources into their hands, they're embracing the new curriculum, and it's proving to be a useful new tool in their instructional toolkit. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that as the year goes on. Also excited about the process of adopting the new math and science curricula, and that's kicking off tomorrow, which is exciting. I know a great team of teachers, parents, and admin has been assembled, and it's something that we are looking forward to this year. We've also reconfigured many of our classrooms to accommodate the new furniture, again, rolling with delays at the beginning to delivery, but now it's all in situ. The teachers are really using the flexibility that the new furniture offers to enhance their instruction. An added bonus, it's really brightened up the campuses, and it's much easier for our hardworking custodial teams to keep clean, which is super important right now. We've had successful back to school nights on all of our elementary school campuses, and we're looking forward to the BIS back to school night also. Also on elementary campuses, we've got parent-teacher conferences at the end of this week and next week, which we're super excited about. Teachers are looking forward to making connections with families and planning collaboratively to ensure this is a year filled with learning for our students. And in that vein, one of the things that we're focusing on all of our campuses, both elementary and middle school, is social and emotional learning. The principals have been really glad to see the connections being forged in our classrooms, on the playground, at lunchtimes, and our teachers and support staff are putting a great deal of effort into building community to ensure that the whole child is nurtured. And we really do appreciate that the community recognizing that behavioral and emotional supports are as important as the academic supports that we're giving as we adjust and adapt to our instruction after the disruption that we've had over the last couple of years. On the academic side of things, we've been assessing our students to establish baselines and get a solid understanding of our students' capabilities, as well as their opportunities for growth and their challenges. Our RTI team, who's also running the long-term independent study program, is working in concert with our teachers, and the principals are excited to get a really clear picture of where we need to go with instruction as we start to accelerate into the school year. I think that probably covers the bulk of what the principal group has to say about the first 3 weeks. Can't quite believe it's only been 3 weeks of school. I'd also like to just personally say how grateful I am to the group of principals for the incredibly supportive, collegiate way in which we're working together. Although concerns for safety still weigh heavily on us, we all know that we've got a support system to rely on. And we all know that when we wake up at 3 a.m, there'll be somebody to text with. Seriously, we're excited about getting stuck into the business of helping our students grow and enjoy being back at school, learning and having fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. All right, so let's move on to the next statement, which is our statement from our superintendent.
So I'd like to start by echoing both what Brian and Jude mentioned. That's everybody's really hard at work. It's been another difficult year. And actually, although we were able to maintain staff at the sites, it's also been a bit of a strain centrally because, of course, the staff we deleted was central staff this past year to make cost savings. So it's been a tough year. It's been a lot of work, but everybody is making it work. And so far, we've seen a lot of success with both the start of school and everybody working really hard and our kids back and the excitement that provides. So I had a really strange experience today. So for the first time, I've been in the district. It's been 14 months now. I was in a meeting with live people, and the only time that's happened before is very occasionally with trustees, and then monthly or biweekly with principals, and then district office staff. So it was really honestly it was a surreal moment to be in the room with PTA council. Trustee Reed and I were meeting with them, and it was lovely. It was lovely to have the energy and be able to actually meet people in person, but realizing that I've been meeting with many of these folks for 14 months and never met any of them, with the exception of a couple, was just one of the most strange experiences. So it was just an interesting moment. I sat with it all day, just thinking, wow, I forgot about all the different contexts that live meetings provide, everything from body language to being able to directly communicate with folks and be able to have that face-to-face. So it was really nice. Of course, I continue to be at all the campuses, and the principals are doing a great job. Principal Lawrence just shared with you the second year, and even though it's a lot, how well they're handling it, and they're working extremely well together. Last year and this year, the principals have really formed into a collaborative working team, which was nice to see. It was definitely a step that they were ready to take, and it's been great to see that they've taken it. And it's a lot, not just on them in the district office and the teachers, but also on our professional staff. So I don't want to go without recognizing all the professional staff, our secretaries, our custodians, our maintenance and grounds folks, our nutrition workers. We've really had a hard time staffing up, but we were successful this year in getting the staff that we needed, especially in the professional services area, because the pay there and the amount of competition, pay is low, competition is fierce to get those folks. So just so pleased with all the work that's being done. So that's been a really wonderful start. We have a lot of interesting things tonight. There's a lot of business on the agenda tonight, a lot of things that are just sort of routine, but there's also a couple of ones that I think will grab the attention, particularly the BCE donation night. BCE outdid itself again with raising a large sum of money that they're going to be presenting to the district for their annual contribution, which is now going entirely to certificated salaries and programs. And we also are going to be discussing a topic that was on the agenda that had not really been discussed in detail before, and that is our first presentation at workforce housing, which we've been working on for, the past 8 months. Ever since I introduced it to the team, they sort of took off with it, and it's been engaging, interesting thinking, and that'll be fun to present to the community and to the board for the first time. So everything's going in all sorts of different directions. So and getting a lot of work done, and we're back successfully and in a healthy and safe manner.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, now we'll move on to the statements from the board. Trustee Wong, do you have a statement?
Just to mention that I went to the owners meeting, and you're going to hear a lot about what I heard at that meeting, which was very exciting indeed. That's it.
Thank you. Trustee Reed?
Hi, everybody. Just a couple of quick updates. So as Chris mentioned, we were at a live PTA council meeting today, which was exciting. Knowing that we're going back live next month, it was a good chance to kind of see the setup and work out some of the bugs in it. So that was fun. The big things that came out of the PTA council meeting, as Principal Lawrence mentioned earlier, and during the meeting, Principal Afshar mentioned, there's a big focus on SEL with the students this year, which was great to hear. They talked a little bit just about how parents could still be involved, even though they're not necessarily fully back on campus yet, and some parameters around requirements when parents are on campus. I think it's been a while since we've had parents on campus, and so there was talk about the need for still fingerprinting background testing, because we have a lot of new parents that have come into the district since we were doing that. So PTA is going to make sure that that communication goes back out. And in addition, there's actually a requirement that's always been in place that we've never really implemented, but there's a requirement for a TB test as well for volunteers on campus. And I think with everything going on with COVID vaccine and things like that, it's the first time that that's been kind of brought back up. So they're gonna make sure that that gets communicated out to parents in the district as well before they come back on campus, so that we're following all of those requirements. And then the other kind of big thing that came out of that meeting was Member Hub, which I know all of the schools are using, and we'll probably hear a little more about this, but they're completely changing their business model, which is no longer the model that we use. So I know a lot of sites have been struggling with Member Hub and they can't access it. So PTA is relooking at kind of how we have directories and how parents are communicated with. So I think we'll probably hear more on that over the next couple of months. But Member Hub is looking to kind of close down our structure and the way we work with it by December. So they're putting a group together to kind of figure out how they're going to move forward with that communication. BCE is presenting tonight. I won't steal their thunder, but it's a very exciting time for them. The only other thing that they wanted to make sure that we were aware of is that on Saturday, they're having their Scholar Circle All Natural Stone event to recognize Scholar Circle donors and to thank the community. They're capping it at 140 people and they're keeping it outside, masking, vaccination requirements, all of that. So trying to keep it really safe, but wanting to at least bring people together in a smaller celebration. And I think the only other thing is Trustee Mudd and I are on the Explore Committee for the potential parcel tax. And we brought that up at the PTA Council meeting as well, and the need for the community to get involved if we move forward with that. We're still in the very preliminary stages of that. So we'll kind of keep everybody posted on that as it comes up. And that's all.
Thank you. Trustee Sarpangal?
Thanks, President Kendall. My only update is I attended the Bond Oversight Committee with Tim and some of the others recently, and a lot of good stuff going on there, including some good advanced planning that hopefully should have some benefits for us over the coming period. So that's all I have.
Thank you. And Trustee Mudd?
Hi, everyone. Hope your students are settling in and everyone's doing well. Since our last board meeting, I have attended with all of my fellow trustees board offsite, which was a meeting to go over our governance norms, standards, and expectations to make sure we are cultivating a healthy board culture that is aligned with our core mission, which is serving the kids. I also attended with Trustee Wong an owners meeting, as she mentioned. Tim and Richard have done such an impressive job working with all of our campuses, and we're going to hear more about that tonight, but it's incredibly exciting and they've worked so hard and it's looking really fantastic. In addition, I attended with Trustee Reed, as she mentioned, the parcel tax meeting. The purpose of this meeting was to understand community feedback and the plausibility of passing a parcel tax. It was also to understand if some of our community leaders and our teachers have the energy and commitment that it would take to pass a parcel. We're definitely interested to see if we have any members of the community and teachers that are willing to help lead this possible initiative. So if you are a teacher, a parent, or a community member that's interested in helping, please reach out. Remember that a parcel tax is for people, so it's 100% salaries, which would greatly help our future budget. Lastly, I have the honor of joining our teachers and Mrs. Silversmith tomorrow as they kick off the math adoption process. I'm very much looking forward to the deep dive in the curriculum. I was able to join the teachers virtually last year for parts of their ELA adoption, but this will be exciting to be with them in person. For those interested, our math adoption team with our math teacher leaders and experts will be spending 9 full days working together to select the right program for our students. So it's pretty exciting stuff. That's it. Thanks, President Kendall.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Mudd. And I just had a short comment. You heard through many of the statements from our district, the strong focus on mental health, and I really want to laud that. This has not been the school year that we were hoping for. It's had a lot more baggage and stress than we had wished. And I'm just so proud and grateful to be part of a district that has this strong emphasis on mental health while having an outstanding education as well. So thank you to all the staff and district office and all the teachers for putting that our kids' mental health forward. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on now, and we are on item number 11, which is board communications. This is just an information item. We received a grand jury report. Are there any comments?
It's just interesting to note, Ms. Bell did a presentation on staff diversity last year, and it has been a concerted effort that we stated early on of when I got here to diversify staff and make that effort. And I think we're actually going to see that already yielding some differences when we do an update on that report this year. And it's interesting. So we didn't know about this grand jury report when we made that effort, but it's interesting. That's one of the things that they suggest doing is districts actually making the statement and the stated effort to actually work at diversifying their staffs, which is exactly what we said we were doing last year. And so it's it's an interesting correlation. I actually had no idea the grand jury report was out or coming this year. So it made me feel like we were moving in the right direction, which I think is good for the district.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Are we putting out a response to the grand jury report, Chris?
It's the grand jury report comes from the county determining issues that are salient in the public sphere. Last year it was cybersecurity and the lack thereof, and asking everybody to make sure they were compliant with a certain number of issues. This year, this grand jury report will result in the county issuing a number of suggestions as well as compliance items that they'll want done in this sphere as well. But having read through this report, it looks like we actually have a pretty good start before they even issue those. So this is the initial report, and I think we already have our head start on it.
So we wait for the county to send us those recommendations and then reply?
Yeah, after the county and the grand jury gather information, they put forward a set of recommendations as well as data requirements for all municipal organizations in the county. And then we tend to all report out and then sign an affirmation that everything they've asked that we've done, that we do is in place, or that we will put it in place.
Okay.
All right. No further comments. We will move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second?
Second it.
Thanks, Kate. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay, so now we move on to item number 14 or 13.
Yes, President Kendall, we will be unmuting Craig Darling, the BCE president. One moment.
Okay, great. So we're on item 13.1, Burlingame Community for Education Foundation presentation.
Kirsten, I think that
Actually,
never
I'm
mind.
here.
He's here.
Hi, Greg.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, board. On behalf of BCE, I can't thank you all enough for everything you are doing and have done for the community. It gives me amazing pleasure today to be able to present to you a check from our donors and our community and all of our volunteers. On behalf of BCE, and I have a little check here for $2.5 million. Sorry, you can't really see the check, but we are really excited to be able to grant this to the district to use as we delineated. And you know, we're going to continue to strive as we have for the last 40 years to do what we do to make the community proud. And I can't thank our volunteers, our executive staff, our team, our donors, and you, the board of directors, for allowing us to do what we do. Thank you so much. And we're honored to do this. And we're really excited about this coming year.
Thank you, Craig. On behalf of the board, we'd like to accept the check.
Awesome.
We're so grateful to all the BCE donors for this $2.5 million investment in our children. And also thank you to the board for their hard work on making this happen. We're so grateful to be part of a district like this. Are there any other
comments? Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Craig, did you still want to show the video?
Yeah, if you could, that would be awesome. Welcome. I'm Craig Darling, president of BCE. It looks like we may have lost the video, but just an official presentation.
And the outtakes reel will be out on tonight on Steve Colbert from the park. It was great that BCE set that up, Craig. It was actually great to also see the board and BCE in public together live again. I mean, I'd actually never seen it. It was my first time. I didn't know what to expect again. And so thank you so much. And I want to encourage the community or anybody that's watching, the BCE grant letter is attached. And we've added a lot more, I don't know what you'd like to call it. Great, Craig, maybe you have an idea, clarity around calling out exactly what it is that the BCE annual grant is covering. So if you're curious what it pays for, it's very clearly laid out so that you can see what it is that the actual fundraising efforts of our community goes to supporting in Burlingame. And this was done collaboratively last year with the BCE board and their members, and figuring out what were the highest priorities that folks wanted to see continue as far as their contribution supporting. And so it's a really nice list focusing on PE and smaller class sizes in the music program, as well as world languages and all of the professional development that we do in the district for our teachers. So we really support BCE supporting teachers and program in our district. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 14.1, our equity and diversity update with Assistant Superintendent Marla Silversmith.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. As you remember, the first couple of our board meetings when we do equity and diversity, we're not quite bringing data yet. We're waiting for things to settle. So in October, you'll start to see the first data. However, this evening, we are bringing forward a very important resolution to our community. It is the Burlingame School District resolution denouncing racism and reaffirming equity through anti-racist actions and commitments for approval this evening. Thank you, Ms. Takis.
All right, so this is an action item. Would we like to make a motion, or should we read it first? Would anyone like to read through this statement?
I would, but I don't know if I have my readers on me. If Deepak can do it, he can. That's
Sure.
great.
I'll do it. So the Burlingame School District resolution denouncing racism and reaffirming equity through anti-racist actions and commitments. Resolution number 2021/22-5. Whereas since our nation's inception, institutional and structural racism and injustice have led to deepening racial disparities across all sectors of society and have lasting negative consequences for our communities, cities, and nation, robbing countless lives and futures of people of color in the process. And whereas the Burlingame School District Board of Trustees recognizes all human beings are born free, are equal in dignity and rights, and have the potential to contribute constructively to the development and well-being of society. And whereas the recent killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and other Black Americans demonstrate the ongoing systemic bias and institutional racism in American society and highlight our nation's history of violence, racism, and disregard for humanity, dignity, and lives of students, families, and communities of color, calling upon us to speak out, take action, and confirm our resolve to work for change and fight for a better world for our children. And whereas dismantling the unchecked institutional racism that abounds in our educational system is a key lever for creating a more equitable and anti-racist community, nation, and world. And can move this down. Thank you. whereas racism, racial bias, and bigotry in American schools and communities negatively impact students of color and their families, often relegating them to school systems with fewer resources and opportunities and hindering their ability to access and benefit from public education in the same way other students do. And whereas schools have an important role to play in examining and addressing policies and procedures that are racist and hold back students of color instead of nurturing their intelligence and protecting their futures. And whereas our public schools are facilitators of the limitless growth potential of all people, with the charge to instill in our youth a belief that every person deserves to live with dignity, be valued for their humanity, and be treated ethically. And whereas understanding racism, racial injustice, racial inequality in America is integral to understanding both the myth of meritocracy in the United States and the everyday experiences of people of color. And whereas it is essential to teach the experiences, honor the history, and highlight the contributions of Black people throughout history and our ethnic studies, while ensuring that every Black person has the social, economic, and political power to thrive. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the disproportionate physical, mental, and financial toll on Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Burlingame School District Board of Trustees stands firmly against bigotry, prejudice, discrimination, and inequity in all forms, both institutional and individual, and wishes to affirm its commitment to the well-being and safety of Black community members, and let them know they are not alone and that our district stands in solidarity with them and their struggle for justice. Be it further resolved that the Burlingame School District Board of Trustees will not tolerate racist treatment of any members of our community, and we will speak out against racism and systemic oppression in our society to help stop the spread of bigotry, affirming our commitment to the safety and well-being of our students in combating racial biases, microaggressions, racial profiling, and hate crimes in our government system and school district. And be it further resolved, the Burlingame School District Board of Trustees is committing ourselves to eradicating institutional racism in our schools and to eliminating disparities in educational outcomes for students of color. And be it further resolved, the Burlingame School District Board of Trustees commits itself not only to address the symbols of institutional racism, but also to proactively identify and address biases, practices, policies, and institutional barriers that perpetuate injustice and inequality in our schools and our community. And be it further resolved that the Burlingame School District is committed to restorative justice practices, anti-racist training, culturally responsive teaching, and resources that provide safe spaces for discussions on race and injustice. And be it further resolved that the Burlingame School District will work tirelessly and collaboratively with staff, students, and families to dismantle institutionalized racism in our society and school district. Finally, be it resolved, the Burlingame School Board of Trustees clearly and unequivocally affirm that Black Lives Matter. Passed and adopted by the Board of Trustees of the Burlingame School District at its regular meeting held on this 14th day of September 2021 by the following vote.
With that, thank you, Deepak. Do we have a motion to pass this resolution?
I make a motion to pass resolution 2021-22-5 denouncing racism.
Thank you, Kate. In a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Deepak. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Item 14.2. Resolution 2021 assignment based on education code for superintendent. And I believe this is Ms. Bell.
Yes, thank you. So I bring forth to you resolution 21-22/4, assignment based on education code 35029. This is for our superintendent. Education code 35029 allows the governing board to waive the credential for the chief administrative officer of that school district under their jurisdiction. Superintendent Christopher Mount Benitez has prior experience and certification as a public school administrator in the state of New York and California. So the Board of Trustees of Burlingame School District may waive California certification for Superintendent Mount Benitez.
Thank you, Allison. Do we have a motion to approve this resolution? Or is there a discussion?
It would be a vote.
Yeah, we need a motion to pass the resolution. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move to pass resolution item 14.2, resolution 2021/22-4, assignment based on Education Code 35029 for superintendent for 2021/22 school year.
Thank you, Deepak. In a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. All in favor? Aye.
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 Great. Item 15.1, lease-leaseback amendments 1 and 2 for BIS Student Recreation Center and Quad. I believe our speaker is Mr. Ryan.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. At its May 11th board meeting, the Board of Trustees approved a resolution awarding the site and lease facilities to Alton Construction and directed staff to negotiate a maximum price for demolition for increment 1 and return to the board for ratification. So tonight, we are presenting for ratification by the board that lease amendment in the amount of $1,219,088 for the demolition. And we're also presenting tonight for the staff's for the board's approval, lease amendment 2 to amend that lease, adding $14,922,146 to the current total to build the gym as well, for a guaranteed maximum price of $16,147,734. This construction will end November of 2022, and we are on budget.
Well, this is very exciting. Do we have any comments or discussion for Tim? No? Okay, a motion to approve the lease-leaseback amendments.
I'll make a motion to approve the lease-leaseback amendments 1 and 2 for BIS Student Recreation Center and Quad guaranteed maximum price.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Florence. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. And then, Tim, you are on deck again for 15.2, lease amendment 1 for BIS Auditorium.
We've been very active in pursuing bidding in this COVID climate, and I'm pleased to say that tonight we're able to present lease amendment 1 for the guaranteed maximum price with Wickman Building and Construction for the amount of $3,401,895,000 for the BIS Auditorium modernization. Construction would end April 2022. And this does bring us in on budget, but very tight with having no program contingency, but we do have a project contingency built into the contract.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions on this item?
Tim, can you just clarify program versus project contingency? So everyone.
Sure.
knows?
When the board approves the budget allocation summaries, which looks at how we're going to be running our program for our various bond measures, within those each budget item, we build a contingency on top of the contract amount, so that should there be any unforeseen or problems, we're able to take care of it out of contract. We have eliminated that in this particular contract, so that we're able to afford the escalation in prices that we're seeing going up. We are carrying a 12% contingency in the contract, but we used to also have a contingency on top of that. And in this particular case, to get within program budget, we have eliminated that and absorbed it into the contract. There is a risk that we will be coming back to the board in the future, should there be any unforeseen in a 52-year-old auditorium modernization.
Hey, Tim, can you just clarify the work on this one in particular? This is which part of the auditorium is this one?
This is the lobby and the interior of the auditorium itself and the stage area. It's also a new lighting control system for the stage. So in the what is a storage room in the hallway, there'll be a new electrical pack with air conditioning in there to keep it hot from overheating.
Got it. Right.
And it's showing the value engineering that you did.
Yes, ma'am.
It's listed in there. So some of the lobby finishes and things.
Some of the lobby finishes changed. We went from a higher P-lam into a drywall, but we feel strongly that we need to try and stay within budget when we can. We're able to and come to the board only in dire circumstance. So we were able to change some of the finishes and eliminate some of the scope so that we were able to stay within budget.
It's also very exciting. Do we have any other questions or comments? Or would someone like to make a motion on this one?
Can I ask just a general question? So I know you mentioned that costs are escalating and we're seeing that happen. Are there other big projects that we have lined up that we're concerned about? And maybe this will come from the conversation around the bond owners meeting and things like that, but I'm just wondering what other big projects and if we foresee some challenges there.
We do, and in tranche one, the next large project that is currently approved to move forward is the Roosevelt and Burlingame Intermediate School electrical upgrades and HVAC upgrades. We had a meeting about it this morning that we're looking at pricing and seeing what we can get and working to see how we can work that out. But I want to point out that we have not touched any of the board controlled contingencies. So there are potentials. Again, we will try and bring the system under budget wherever we can, but lead times, costs, you're seeing it in your own materials you're buying for your own home right now.
Yeah.
Shipping and labor is significant. A sheet of plywood that used to be 50 is now 100.
Yeah.
Things that used to take 3 weeks are now taking 12. So.
Yeah. Well, it's impressive that you're able to keep them in budget with everything going on. So thank you.
Yep, we have a good team. We have a good team.
Great. Any more comments or questions? If not, we have a motion to approve 15.2.
I'll make a motion to approve 15.2 lease amendment 1 for BIS Auditorium guaranteed maximum price.
Thanks, Kate. In a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Lisa. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. And item 15.3, Measure M and O bond budget allocation summary updates.
So tonight, we come to the board periodically with updates, changing budget line items, closing out projects to actual costs. So tonight, in response to closing out projects and combining funds into one budget allocation summary, eventually we want to move everything into O and combine it in just be tracking one. Staff is recommending moving $2,836,692 of unencumbered funds into Measure M allocation budget summary to O. There's a lot of detail, and I can go through any should you have any questions, but that is the basic premise of what we're doing, and it's closing out projects to actual costs. We are still keeping $200,000 in board controlled contingency within the project because we're not quite done with the work at BIS buildings 2 through 6, and there may be some unforeseens at that time.
Just to help clarify, folks, all the work in M is still being done. This is money that, as projects have closed out from Measure M completion, that's still residual in Measure M. Now here's the goal. This is why we're asking the board to do it. Measure M and Measure O are actually political labels to the bond. That's what the voters passed on the ballot. It actually is all in the same fund, which is Fund 21, held in the district, which is the construction fund. And that's funded by yields from the bond program. But as long as we keep two different measures on active, right? So we have both M and O active right now. It requires that we do double auditing and double oversight, and it's all in one fund. So it actually creates a lot of additional unnecessary noise in accounting and oversight. So as we're closing projects, we're now requesting that the board transfer remaining balances over to O to continue the work all in under one title to make the systems a bit clearer and easier for us to run.
But Measure M remains.
The projects that are still active that already started under Measure M will continue to be active. So they will continue through until they're completely closed. And then Measure M will finally close out once those all close. I don't know the timeline on that. Tim, what are the major projects currently active in Measure M?
The major projects currently active is the buildings 2 through 6, and construction is slated to end in December, January. And then it takes the state a while to process final payment. And then once we make that final payment, it's either releases funds or we have to add funds in order to get to where we need to be. As you're seeing, we're just closing out the Roosevelt and Washington buildings this week.
Yeah, so when you say a little while, it can take a couple of years.
Yes.
And so, but what we're trying to do is get as little activity as possible in M so that we don't have to keep doing double auditing, double reporting.
And the language for Measure M and Measure O were close enough that if we roll that money over, it pretty much covers similar projects. So we don't have to like say, well, we rolled over X number of dollars, so it has to cover this item, right?
Correct.
And Tim, can I ask just a quick question? Can you remind me, I know we had M money allocated for the bathrooms and locker rooms in the old gym before O passed. Did that money get reallocated to other M projects or?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
And I just want to say that when M was passed and the budget were built in M, we didn't have O. So we found that there were some duplications. We had budget to pay salaries that we also had in O. So we were able, this was that combination as well, compressing some of those funds.
Awesome.
So tonight, staff is asking the board to approve this transfer of funds and the changes as outlined. I can go through them in detail if you like, but I think they're there in writing pretty clearly that, yeah, Chris is now. And it's to make this transfer, it's a slight change to O, adding it as the income and adding the new budget line item number 17, the irrigation project.
I'll make a motion if we're okay to approve 15.3 Measure M and Measure O bond budget allocation. Is that the right one?
Mhm. Yep.
Bond budget allocation summary updates.
A second. Thanks, Kate.
I'll second.
Thanks, Florence. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. And now,
And we really appreciate, Tim, that you and your team actually have money left over from projects in Measure M that can be moved into Measure O. That's good management. So we appreciate that
Thank
a
you
lot.
for everything.
And I would like to just give the board and the community a heads up. So as we talk construction, as sort of another preview before we get into tonight's presentation materials, and that is that I think it's the first or second board study session that we're going to be conducting this year will be on facilities. And so we're going to need the board to look at some of the work that we have planned and give direction to staff on our tranches that are coming up based on priorities that are emerging in the field of education right now and how they align with our Measure M and Measure O. So what does that mean? That means that when we passed Measure M and Measure O, we put things in tranches, which was like a priority order list of what comes first, second, third, fourth, whatever. And we've made a lot of progress on those priorities. But over the past couple of years, some things have come up which the board might want to consider in reordering some of its priorities. So for example, the state is currently offering matching grants to have districts prepare facilities for a planned continuation of universal access to breakfast and lunch. And so, for example, they're offering grant money to modernize kitchens, which is in our tranche. But to gain access to that type of grant money, we might need to do it sooner rather than later. They're also offering incentive monies to get classrooms ready for TK. So all 4-year-olds 4 years from now will be coming to public schools like a kindergarten, except it will be a pre-K or a TK. But that means at some of our sites, and I think of McKinley and Lincoln in particular, when I say that, we're going to need to do some work that we might need to move up, not just because we're going to have little ones coming to our doors that we need to accommodate, but because they will also be offering some funding to get that done in a timely manner. So we're going to have to think of some of those things that are developing and decide maybe we move, if we look at our next 5 things, maybe we move number 4 to number 1 so that we get to take advantage of those financial opportunities for the district and really make our bond money last and have the largest impacts possible. That also takes into account some of what you were just talking about, which is the escalating prices of construction. So we also are going to want the board to think about timing wise with those priorities, when might it be better for the market for us to get the biggest bang out of our bucks for the bond monies to get the most projects done. So we'll be doing that study session. I think it's scheduled for the month of, I want to say December. Is that correct, Tim?
That's my understanding, yes.
That's your understanding. I gave you that understanding, so I hope it's right. study sessions this year are going to look a little bit different, a preview for the community. So our facilities study session will actually happen before the regularly scheduled board meeting. It'll be an informational presentation by staff, followed by a block of time for the board to discuss in public, which is what a board meeting is for, that specific topic, and to ask questions and then provide any direction or guidance to staff so that we can know which direction to go in for the next couple of years with our bond and our construction program. So preview of more to come. We've gotten a lot of construction work done, and tonight 15.4 covers a couple of things that the board had on its agenda. Actually, prior to my arrival in the district, it centered around workforce housing. And just very, very briefly, at a very high level of summary, the district had engaged in discussions about workforce housing previously. It had discussed the potential of workforce housing being co-located at the district office site. It had discussed doing lease agreements with other local municipal agencies who have more land than we do, to see whether they would be willing to perhaps lease the land or sell the land or swap the land with the district, a large enough piece of land that we could build housing units on. And we've also looked at existing land that the district already owns. And so tonight's presentation is going to cover what is the best option available as far as being able to look at building workforce housing. And it is at the conceptual stage. Tonight's presentation on the conceptual stage, we're looking for the board to give us direction to go into more of the investigative mode. In other words, to start paying consultants to see whether it's viable, and to get a cost estimate as well as a timeline of the likelihood of being able to actually construct workforce housing as we're conceptually sort of presenting to the board this evening. The other thing that's in this item title is, it says district office and new electric central kitchen. And that relates to what I was just saying about the timeliness of some of the items and making sure that they all come together in a way that's beneficial to the district and the community and our staff. And so the reason those are in there is because one of the big areas that's been discussed in previous workforce housing conversations is the viability of building at the district office. And it turns out that because of some subterranean waterways, as well as some restrictions and the size of the property, we were not going to be able to fit more than 2 to 4 units, 4 stories high on that property. And then parking actually wouldn't even be a possibility. So it was not going to be particularly feasible to build on the property. But you'll see why those items are included in this evening's over sort of overall presentation about workforce housing. So with that said, Kirsten, would you be able to share the PowerPoint presentation so that I'm not trying to share it and flip back and forth between screens at the same time?
The presentation for the kitchen?
The attachment, yep. It's a PowerPoint attachment.
Okay, give me one moment.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have it up.
Oh, Tim could share.
Tim, I'm sorry, did you say you have it up and you can just share it? Okay, well, there it's coming anyway. Okay, so what you're seeing here is sort of the culmination of my discussions with Tim and Richard and some of their team, of looking at the property and what would be possible given our location and options for actually investigating and building workforce housing. So we're going to talk mostly tonight about conceptually where it could go, as well as how it would be funded. Should we go to slide 2, please? So the Board of Trustees had requested this information some time ago. We put it off after the COVID emergency declaration was called and said that we would come back to it once the declaration of emergency had ended. And so it is on this evening's agenda for direction to be able to move forward with investigation. So the 2 questions that we hope to answer tonight is, given our current property inventory, where might we actually build housing and how could we fund that project? Next slide, please, Kirsten. So this is an aerial view of the BIS and Franklin campuses. And you can see that there's an area there that includes essentially the median in between the asphalt of Franklin and the driveway that goes up behind BIS. It encircles some portable classrooms in the rear, as well as the hillside behind Franklin and below the residential neighborhood up there. From the top, that might look like it's a fairly small piece of property. It's actually not. You can see that it's that the width of that property is actually larger than a number of our buildings. So it's larger than it might first appear. So that just gives you a conceptual idea of the property that we've identified that actually is large enough to build on in the district. Next slide, please. So how large is it? It's large enough that conceptually, and this is before we would work with teams that actually specialize in residential developments, that we could be looking at 50 to 60 housing units or more. So that's we're doing fairly conservative estimates for the board here, and that would be a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So this conceptual design actually provides a mix of all 3 of those housing types. And we could look at access to that property in multiple ways. We could actually potentially do an entrance off of Truesdale, or extending and basically fencing off the existing driveway that we already have, and either gating it or making it accessible only to folks that are resident in the unit area. And so if the board is interested in pursuing this type of concept, we would have to be looking immediately at entitlements and approvals, both with the city, as well as working through the board and having a lot of community engagement, as well as likely city review, engaging them as a partner, and getting them involved in the review to make sure that we basically tried to make people as happy as possible with the project. Now it's school property, which is treated differently. So we don't necessarily have to do all of those things, but the group of us that worked on this is recommending that we do all of those things to make sure that not only are we getting out of it what we're looking for our workforce, but that our community and the city are as aware, involved, and as pleased as possible with the outcome of developing that. Now, this is a really interesting area because it's actually sloped. And so this concept comes out of the idea of being able to build back into that slope, which is larger, like I said, a larger area than you might imagine. Now, again, this is conceptual. So every time people see a picture, the big threat is that you look at this and you say, oh my gosh, that's what it's going to look like. This is conceptual. So what's conceptual about this? So the area is being identified as a real area. But for example, you can see that there's 4 separate buildings with parking lots and roads. That might not be what it looks like. Perhaps it's parking underneath the buildings. Perhaps a developer says, no, we would actually just do 2 large, long buildings. So this is conceptual, just showing what we could fit on from sort of a building block concept. Next slide, please. So how do projects like this get funded by a public school district? So you can do funding for workforce housing in a number of ways. You can always take anything that the board approves out of the general fund. However, using general fund monies for things like development is not recommended, because general fund monies are specifically intended for the education of our students in that year. So the staff would not recommend general fund monies. Certificates of participation. This is the public school version of a bank loan. This is basically doing a construction mortgage. This puts up the district's funding from the state as collateral to secure a loan. And the idea is that you then have to stay within the confines of how much rental revenue you can yield to pay the certificates of participation. And typically certificates of participation run between 20 to 40 years of maturity, just like a mortgage. And so at the end of that time, of course, the district would own them outright. They would become a district asset. And of course, we would have to maintain it that entire time as well. So it's a little more complicated than just a straight transaction of the COPs being paid by rents. There's a lot of maintenance and other items in there as well. This is one possibility, certificates of participation to use for something that's going to actually generate the income to pay for them, is one possibility. It really is going to depend if that's a viable option on the analysis once we engage with contractors to tell us how many units can be generated, what amount of money those units would generate that would be more affordable for our staff, and then what size of an actual project it could build. So that would be the certificate of participation route. Bond money. So money from Measure M closeouts like the ones that were approved tonight, or rollover and restructuring of O, could also be used to help fund workforce housing. So enrollment is slowly declining. We've talked about that. Thankfully, we have TK coming in the next few years, which is really gonna get us back up there. But enrollment has slowly been declining, and the board may want to reconsider some of the scope or placement of some of the projects. What does that mean? Some of the projects for Measure M and Measure O were aspirational, based on the idea that we were going to continue to grow in enrollment actually fairly rapidly for the next 10 to 15 years, and that hasn't occurred. Our enrollment has slowed down. So the idea of building new buildings to accommodate more and more people, meaning children at our sites, we might want to revisit some of those. As projects close out, like what we suggested tonight and was passed by the board, if we have projects that close out under budget, that perhaps we close them out and allocate those monies to beginning the workforce housing development. So in other words, if you can make savings, allocate the savings to the project. We could also potentially sell any current district assets. For example, the current district office, which is why the district office is a part of this title this evening. So in looking at the district office, since it wasn't possible to use it for workforce housing, the question came up of, well, because it's about a 5,000 square foot building, I believe, that we purchased. I believe, Tim, was it in the 90s?
Yes.
90s. So we purchased it about 25, 30 years ago. It's a separate facility because of our reduction in staff at the district level. We now have all staff in one building. I understand, for the first time, which is great. But because we have fewer district office employees, it really also begs the question, if we can't do other construction there, like workforce housing, do we need a whole separate property for what is essentially amounting to about 8 to 10 of us a day, which is how many people actually use that as their site. And so we were looking at other potential spots that if we didn't need the current district office, where could we locate it? And this is all under the idea of, if we can relocate the district office elsewhere, then that building, which we can't use for a school, we can't use for any other purpose because it's not considered suitable for students, we would be able to then sell and put that money also towards workforce housing. And so that's an example of a sale of a current district asset. The district does have a couple of other assets which are small, but we could discuss that as well. We could also look at partnering with a housing developer. Now, what does this look like? So when municipalities partner with a housing developer, basically they agree to build the actual project, and then they take occupancy or control of it, and they actually charge and collect the rentals to recoup the investment they've made in developing the property. And of course, they strike a bargain or a contract with the district in advance to make sure that they have a period of time that's sufficient for them to recoup their investment, as well as obviously some profit. That's what those companies are in the business for, before the district gets direct control and ownership back of the property. That's also had some mixed results in districts that have done it, because of course, the district doesn't have direct control of it. And if it's being seen as an asset and a benefit for employees, that can cause some potential conflict when it may not be being run and maintained like the district and its employees expect it to be. But that is a possibility, and it saves money as far as investing in the concept for a district. So I'm calling out all these different possibilities financially because I want the board to understand the array of items that are out there. There's some other things that work into that, such as tax credits, et cetera, that might help the district and make the project a little cheaper or attract a developer to help us do it so that they get some offsets. But what I would probably propose once we're done with a more thorough assessment and have permission from the board to go into more thorough planning is a mixture of these things. So for example, we might want to consider putting in some seed money. We won't be able to afford all of it from a bond. We would not be able to afford all of it from a COP, but maybe we do some of it from a COP, some of it from existing bond, some of it from selling some existing assets, and then also having a developer throw in with us so that it's a bit more of a blended model that sort of gets the best out of all of those different potential avenues of developing property. So we can see the next slide, please. So if we were to go the route of also looking at where the district office could be, what you're seeing here is what we call Building 1 at the BIS campus. You can see that the Building 1 was currently used to house our IT department, as well as I'm going to call it the wrong thing, Assistant Superintendent Silversmith. What's it been called before? The something learning center, and I'm not going to get it right.
Professional Learning Center?
The Professional Learning Center. And it also housed a classroom and it houses a shop. However, as we mentioned earlier this evening, we also need a central kitchen, and the central kitchen is the only central function that is not incorporated into a district office. So we looked at this building because we are slowly declining in enrollment as a district, and BIS reflects that. And this building is already largely used for non-student activities. It was on the slate during one of our next tranches to actually knock down and rebuild. However, that would be sort of an approach for revitalizing the area for students. And we already have enough classrooms on the campus to accommodate all of our educational needs. And the existing building is actually a strong, well-built structure that we could actually remodel instead of knocking down and repurpose as the district office. It has a very nice potential entrance. We're already adding new parking to that area. So it actually could be more accessible and more reasonable as a district office. Now, at first we thought, well, it can't be as large as the standalone building, so we're going to have to sacrifice space if we make this suggestion to the board. Well, it turns out it's actually larger. And so the blue space on this drawing is approximately equivalent to the current district office building that we're in. And that leaves a large area that's marked as green that we could also add in the projects that are already in the construction program of developing the central kitchen, as well as a district server room, which we need for all of our central applications, which would then free up the current district office to be accessed and added into this effort. And is that the final? Whoops, sorry. So what does Measure O? Somebody asked earlier, what's included? Are these things allowed in Measure O? So what does Measure O say about funding workforce housing? The language from the resolution, part of it is that bond proceeds will be expended to modernize, replace, renovate, expand, construct, acquire, equip, furnish, etc. The classrooms and school facilities of the district. The school facilities projects to be funded include, but shall not be limited to. And then from the next page on the list is workforce housing to increase accessibility for district employees to quality, affordable housing. So it was specifically included in the bond language. I want to be clear with folks that I am not suggesting using entirely bond funds. This project would be far too expensive, but there might be some money depending upon what we do with the tranches to help get it started. And it would make it a more appealing project for somebody from the outside to work with the district on. And that's the end of the slideshow.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. So hopefully that made sense. That was a lot, I know, and Tim and I are here to answer any questions for folks.
I am so happy to see this presentation and so grateful to see all this creativity and thoughtfulness that's put in, and I will enthusiastically support moving forward with this process. Are there any comments that we have? Yes. Oh, Lisa, and then Florence.
I was lucky to see this at the owners meeting and was so excited about it. I have just a curiosity question. What is in it for a developer to join us? Do they get sort of a tax benefit if we work with a developer, or what's the upside of involving them?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. So there's a lot of tax credits out there right now to actually build what they call mixed unit developments, which accommodate so housing that accommodates public employees, which of course school district employees are counted. There's credits out there for that. There's also tax credits available to do development for not-for-profits. So a school district is also a not-for-profit. And there's also tax rebates available from cities to make sure that they are building an appropriate mix of housing, so that, for example, in Burlingame, one of the big struggles is that there isn't any housing being developed for folks that make under, several $100,000s a year. Our condos in the area that are new are going for $1 million a piece now, and that's for relatively small condos. And so this would actually help our city and a developer that works in the Bay Area potentially check the box, if you will, that they are helping build units that are not for sale or for rent to folks that are going to be paying, $4,000 and $5,000 per unit.
So, okay, great. And my other question was, in the beginning of the slide deck, there was a map, and it looked like maybe, I think it was on the second slide. Is there an existing building that we would take down to this is where, if we are adding at BIS, not at the district office.
So the building that you see included in that outline are some portable classroom structures that we added to the campus when we were modernizing the wings. Currently, those, and what you're looking at, Trustee Mudd, are 4 different classrooms and some storage sheds. What they are currently housing, I think 2 of them are being used for district storage of excess furniture, backup furniture, and the other 2, one of them is being used as the office for maintenance and groundskeepers right now. And Tim, what's the 4th one being used for?
It is a shop for maintenance.
It's where the maintenance guys are storing their equipment for the district. So we did have classrooms in there as recently as last year, because we were redoing the wings of the BIS campus. But as those wings have been reopened, all the teachers are out of those portables and students, and they're all in the new classrooms.
Got it. Well, it's so exciting. Thank you. And I'm definitely on board for exploring this further.
Florence?
Yes, and I'm very excited as well. Thanks, Chris. I was wondering about the benefit to the city if they could count that towards their requirement for building affordable housing. It sounds like they can, which is good. One of the things that I know becomes a difficulty when people try to partner to build affordable housing is that you kind of lose the power of who you can put in your housing. So I don't want to make any deals where we can't restrict it only to BSD employees, you know what I mean? Because sometimes if you take certain tax credits, you actually have to open it up to the public,
right?
Who qualify in terms of income, but we can't just keep it narrow to us. So I just want to caution us to make sure we don't make what sounds like a great deal at first, but we actually might be jeopardizing several units that our own employees wouldn't be able to use. So I was wondering too, if the project could be kind of phased in, how you see housing developments where people actually move in to a neighborhood, even though there are like more houses planned, because it's just, I assume it's cost efficient that way, to do it that way, to have people actually live in there already as you go. Or is that a possibility for us?
That's so if the board gives us permission to go ahead with the planning and exploration tonight, that's actually the type of thing that we would find out. So that really requires an expertise that we don't have on our team. So like my knee jerk would be to say, of course it makes sense, because then you're starting to pay for things as others are being built. However, that's based on this hypothetical design of having 4 different buildings. A developer might come in and say, no, you need to do one long building, right? So we really need somebody with more of the residential development expertise. And there are companies now that have partnered with municipalities, community colleges, and school districts couple of them, by the way, located in the peninsula, which is sort of interesting, right? That actually focus on doing this type of work. And so we really need them to come in with their expertise and do an analysis of the project and give us what our options are. So that presentation will probably be done by experts for the board. In other words, I think we've taken it. Maybe Tim, maybe you have some other things you'd want to point out, but I think Tim and Richard and I have taken it as far as our knowledge base allows, and it'll be time to bring in folks that know more.
Yes, tonight we're asking the board to approve that this become a project that we can start working on constraint analysis, doing some surveys, some geotechnical reports, all things that are going to be needed to show to a developer to get this stuff moving forward. We would bring any contracts to the board for approval should there be any costs associated, but that's what we're looking for tonight, is to get you information for future discussion.
Kate, I think you had a question.
I have a couple of quick questions. I agree with everybody. This is awesome to see, and it's super exciting. My two questions are just around kind of the stakeholders involved. I know, Chris, you mentioned some other districts have started already doing this. As far as appetite for something like this, do we feel like this would be something that we would be able to use to bring teachers in? Well, or, you know, I'm just thinking, is it going to sit vacant and no one's going to want this housing? Or, you know, what's kind of the response then to this being done in other districts, and how, you know, how are we looking at that here?
So other local community colleges, universities, and schools in the Bay Area that have done it, it's been very successful. I have been through this process before, and the thing that I remember from working with, I'm guessing some of the same consultants that are out there that I will probably see again through this process, is it's really a great recruiting tool, but it's not always for the folks that are current employees, right? So for example, if there was something really reasonable and nice looking, and that hillside, by the way, would have a view of the water. I mean, we're not talking about it's high enough up that you would actually, you know, have that view, which is a pretty sought after thing. And we own the property. But so for somebody like me, I'm already living in, you know, my cozy little 1-bedroom, and I'm familiar with my area. You know, it's sort of where my heart is. I'm speaking hypothetically here. I'm not that attached to it, but you know, I might not be interested in moving, right? Like I'm actually teaching at Burlingame because I'm already set, and maybe I have a family, or maybe we have family that we live with, or maybe we already own something somewhere. But as a recruiting tool, as the Bay continues to get more and more expensive, for Allison or whoever the head of HR is at the time is recruiting and telling folks that we have housing available, and that it's actually going to be below market rate for employees of the district, right? Yeah. I think that's a pretty strong recruiting tool for the future, because we aren't seeing the cost of living going down in the Bay Area, that's for sure. Yeah. And municipal employees are really struggling to afford it, regardless of whatever level that we're at. So I would always say that BSD got first hit at it, but we might have other people that are interested. So to Trustee Wong's, you know, thinking, we certainly wouldn't want it open to the public. But if in a year we couldn't fill it with enough of our folks, we might want to talk about the city. Do their police and fire folks, for example, have access for a year that we aren't able to fill it up? Because they're having the same struggles that our teachers and our principals and other administrators are having, and that is, if you didn't move into the area a while ago or have a lot of personal wealth, it's just not an affordable place to live in anymore. And it's something that all of the school districts and municipalities are facing in our area.
Yeah. And then I'm just curious, I know we have some meetings with City Council. Have they even been made aware that this is something we're talking about yet? Or is this going to be kind of a new thing when if we move forward with it and taking it to them?
So my obligation is always to bring it to the board first, right? You folks should be hearing about it first. Obviously, I've been working on it. Tim and Richard have been working really hard on it. I've just been saying, I want this, I want this, I want this, and then looking at it, right? They're very good at trying to get everything done. So it's your opportunity to hear it first and say to go ahead or not. So for example, if you say, you know what, none of us is interested tonight, then there's no point in having a conversation with the city council. Have I given the city manager the heads up that this is going to be a board discussion item? And if you tell us to go ahead, that I would like to bring it to the city council as a heads up. so that they're aware that we're discussing it. Absolutely.
We this is long term. This is probably just a random, but we as a district wouldn't be the landlords of something like that, right? You would, if we had something like this, it would be run by a property manager, or would we as a district office and staff take on that role as well?
You're giving me a nightmare right now. I don't think so. I mean, is it possible? Yes, I think it creates more points of conflict than we would want as a school district, because if you're limiting it to employees, and so, for example, let's say that, I don't know, let's say I'm a teacher here for 10 years and I decide to go work for Daly City, right? I go to work for Jefferson. And I give you my 1 month's notice. Does that mean I have to move out of my apartment in that 30 days? And do we want that conflict brought to the board at a regular board meeting? Right? I don't think so. So I'm guessing when we work with experts, they will tell us the best way to do it based on what's being done. My guess is, unless I'm really missing the mark, they're going to say you're going to want to hire a property management company and remove yourself from having to have that direct, like, I don't want to collect rent checks. Like, that's not, I have no interest in that. However, they're going to have to, like a property management company, you know, pass the proceeds to pay the debt for building the building onto the district.
Yeah, and I've gone to workshops on this at the CSBA meetings, and there's a lot to draw on from the experiences of other districts, also how you offboard at the end.
Yep.
A lot of good practices out there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments?
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand, Chris or Tim, what do we have alternatives? Let's say we weren't going to be looking to build workforce housing. Do we have other things that we can do with these excess real estate assets? And are there other things that we could redeploy those funds for instead?
The answer to those things is always yes. So this is something that we're looking at because it was specifically a board request that we look at this as an option. Would we have been looking at it had it not been on the list of things to look at? No, we would have gone ahead with other things that we considered a priority. So there's always an opportunity cost to any of these types of things. So the answer is always yes. I can think of $10 million worth of things to do with every $1 million that we got.
Right. Well, and are there, like, what kinds of limitations or restrictions might there be? Because it just strikes me that this may not be the best use of funds when we already are in a financially strained situation, to actually be embarking on a more expensive type and risky type of project that's actually expanding our potential liabilities rather than the opposite. So I'm just trying to understand what else we can do.
Yeah, and that's why you saw the recommendation that I made in the financial section is that you don't touch student funding to do this type of work, right? This should all be money that is not allocated to student funding. And so that's why we wouldn't want to touch any of the general operating funds of the school district. It would have to be all bond or money associated with real property assets.
Right, but like, are there, again, like it's a different pool, but like, what are there other investments or projects that could be pursued with those funds that are separate from kind of like the general education types of spending?
Of course, yeah. Like I said, it's an opportunity cost. So there are things that are aspirational in the bonds that maybe we can get to someday if we have the money. And by the way, workforce housing was one of them. So the question becomes, what are the priorities of the board? If workforce housing is one of them, then that's one of the things that we would look to deploy the funds for. If it's not, then yes, there's a lot of stuff out there that we would like to get to someday that's on the list that you know could certainly replace that.
So I guess, go ahead, Tim.
The bond resolution passed by the board specifically says we're to explore workforce housing, and that there aren't other projects within that scope that are outside of education. I don't believe. I think this is the only one within the bond language.
Yeah, it was identified as a priority, which is why I'm guessing the board asked for us to do the presentation. But I think what Deepak's asking is the amount of money that you need for construction for the next 15 years of the school, is it enough that if we don't do any workforce housing, that all of the bond money will be spent? And I think the answer to that is yes. It'll be spent on one thing or another. So it really is a matter of prioritizing, sort of like, do you want to build an addition to your house, or do you want to put in a swimming pool? I mean, it really is that type of a.
But not all the money you're talking about is from the pot. So like some of the pots you're talking about would not actually exist if we didn't do this workforce housing.
Correct. So this is the first time that I've suggested the disposal of assets to actually produce some funding. The assets aren't so valuable that it would take care of all the costs. It would probably take care of some of the site costs, but I'm just saying it's one thing that the board could do to help fund this project, to make it a more reasonable lift for the school district. Yeah.
Right.
Or like the COP wouldn't exist if we weren't doing this. It's not a
right. Yeah.
lot of money. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Or maybe like as another kind of like to help my understanding. So like, let's say that you, like you said, you can't fund the full cost. And let's say you think that, okay, we've got this land at BIS where we could build these like hillside condos. Like I'm saying hypothetically, if instead of building affordable housing, specifically for workforce housing, if you looked at the sort of potential, let's say, profit that could be generated on a development that wasn't for that purpose, and could that be done and those funds be used for other purposes?
Yeah, you absolutely, you could. So I would say another way of saying that, tell me if I'm answering your question, Deepak, and that would be, when we dispose of district assets, can we just deposit that money into the general fund instead of depositing it into the construction fund and using it for workforce housing? And the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah.
It's one-time money, obviously, but we could do that for sure. That's you can do that. There are some limitations. Actually, some of those limitations were lifted during the pandemic to give schools the ability to liquidate assets faster, but they've all come back into play. So we've missed that window. But yes, you can use those proceeds for anything that the board essentially deems appropriate.
Yeah. So I guess from my perspective, I would wish to sort of better understand what alternative paths could be pursued and whether, in fact, the best use of those assets or sort of like, allocation of those funds would be to explore this particular one, because it just isn't clear to me if that necessarily is the case. I think in a vacuum, we'd love to have more workforce housing. I mean, we'd like to have, more efficient usage of district facilities, et cetera. But like I maybe just don't fully appreciate sort of like whether that is necessarily the best way to sort of like optimize the management of the assets that we have, as well as the expenditure of an investment of funds that would be required to.
Yeah, and that's exactly the decision the board needs to make. You're basically struggling with exactly the direction. So what we're asking for tonight is get enough information so that you can make a decision, because we can't provide more. I'm a really good generalist. Tim's really good at school construction. Tim's or Richard's he says he used to be an architect. He's a really good architect. He jokes. But you need somebody that specializes in this. And so first of all, we're giving you generalities. We can't give you scope. We can't give you cost. We can't give you a timeline or feasibility. That's where we need to engage in outside folks to tell the board, here's everything that would be required. Here's what would happen. So I don't want anybody to be misled. We're not promising anything. We're just asking for permission to engage with professionals who can give you a good idea. Now, as to what other things the board might feel is more important to do with the money, whether it's in bonds or the sale of district assets, there's a lot of different routes that conversation can take. It sounds like before I got here that there has been enough of a discussion that they asked that it be put in the bond measure. I don't know the background of that. I know you have a lot of
yeah, the idea is that
trustees.
seeing that the difficulty in recruiting teachers on the peninsula with the high cost of living. So this wasn't like a nice to have thing. This was like looking towards the future. How can we retain the best teachers for our children? So what I'm hearing from both Kate and Deepak is maybe a part of this study should be looking at the need for the housing. That's not one of the things that you have listed though, but we've talked about having a survey. But hearing you, Chris, say that that's the current population, you're looking towards the future. So if there's some way to capture that, that need,
so that won't be done by us. That will be done by the consultant as well.
Okay.
And it was included when in the bond language when we initially were getting the bond approved, because there was an appetite from the community for it. So this
we did a survey.
5 board members saying, oh, we should explore this. There was a lot of feedback and support for this. And it helped us get the bond approved, I think, with that being kind of an angle that we were looking at with the money. So
yeah, absolutely. This is not a Chris and Tim initiative. This was something that we were asked to pursue for sure. Yeah.
I think of it sort of similar to the relaxing of ADU regulations, and they're doing that because there's an increasing housing shortage. And so I think the idea with ADUs even is they don't believe that current homeowners that are building ADUs are actually going to be using them as rentals. But the next set of homeowners, the next generation, they'll buy a home and they'll rent the ADU out. And I sort of think of it as long-term thinking for recruiting. Like you said, Chris, it might not be the current employees that we have, but 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, when cost of housing continues to go up, we need to be able to attract the best teachers that we can. And if they can't afford to live here, which they're already having a hard time doing, we're never going to succeed.
Yeah.
And the best custodians.
And the best custodians and the best the whole district. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So the part that I'm hearing that I'm not quite sure how to help the board clarify for itself, for its thinking, is we can give you the options, the feasibility, potential costs, scope, et cetera, of pursuing something like workforce housing. But I'm hearing Trustee Sarpongal ask, well, what are other things that we might want to spend the money on? That's sort of up to the board. So for example, if we aren't pursuing workforce housing, I don't know that I would suggest selling the district office. It was just an option because that was another site that we were looking at for workforce housing prior to my arrival here that I was asked to look at.
Well, and it feels like we have that with the master plan, honestly, right? Like we worked on this really extensive master plan that goes well beyond the scope of what the bond can cover. So it's really just, this would be some of the other stuff we would spend that money on if workforce housing wasn't the route we'd go.
Yeah, that was my prior suggestion, is that, there's far more called out in the tranches of the bond than the bond can ever pay for. So it's a matter of prioritizing, 1 through 10, and maybe we only get the first 8 done. So there's plenty of things to spend those proceeds on. But I think I was also hearing, and Deepak, correct me if I'm wrong, but so could we also use strategies like this just to spend money on other things in the district? And my answer is yes, but I don't know what those other things would be.
And I guess just a follow-up question is, what you mentioned that like the purpose of this is to sort of, decide on whether to sort of proceed with the professionals to do these studies to figure out more of what this might look like. What is the cost of, pursuing that next step of, hiring some consultants to sort of do more studies and
it would actually be an RFP. It would probably be a 2-step RFP. The first one would be for the feasibility study. And then the second part would be for the actual pricing out and scoping.
Okay, Florence, you have a question?
I just have a comment because I don't think I could sleep tonight if I don't say this. I think that there is a housing crisis in San Mateo County that no one, I think, can deny. We have lots of very essential workers all throughout our county who have to travel from Tracy or Manteca to come work here. That's ridiculous. We have a neighboring public entity that has been receiving lots of criticism because of their vision for real estate that was not including a lot of affordable housing, and rightly so. They were criticized. They are a government entity. They are funded by taxpayers, as we are. What's our purpose? You know, we're trying to ensure that our children have the best education they can get. And if one of our huge barriers is that our employees need to move because they can't ever imagine affording the rent, which is, I mean, let alone buying a house. We have land, which is almost just, I mean, that's unbelievable that we have land that we could actually use to build housing, that we don't have to look around for land. And then we have a mechanism to actually fund it. And the creative thinking that's been going on here to move our district office to, frankly, a great location that would actually have much more parking and accessibility than our current district office, to put our district office and all these other things. It just seems morally, for me, if we don't pursue this, we are going against our duty. You know, so I have to say that I cannot look at our assets as like profit generators. This is an opportunity we have to make a big difference in our community. So I am all for it. If anybody doesn't have any more comments about this, I motion to, let's see.
It's a little tricky.
I have a comment about that. First of all, I'd say that's an incredibly unsophisticated view of it, to call it morally wrong to explore whether the best use of assets is to do this. Nobody is suggesting that we take this and take profits and put them in any of our pockets. The point was, you can take those assets and actually more efficiently generate funds that can be used for our duty to educate our students, not for anything else, Trustee Wong. So
I was not directly criticizing you.
I'm just being clear. There's nothing morally wrong with being responsible about questioning the use of our assets and whether it is fiscally responsible to be pursuing projects that will put us further, with further liabilities. And to not know, I mean, it's an emotionally charged statement. Of course, we want more housing for our workforce. There's a question as to whether that should come from all the ADUs that you just mentioned are increasingly going to be built in properties. There's a question whether that should be coming from other affordable housing projects. There's a question whether it should be coming from city-related projects. And we can also potentially be part of that solution, but I don't think it is responsible to just charge into it because it's morally the right thing to do without doing an appropriate, as fiduciaries for the district, to actually think about whether this is the best thing to do.
But that's what this proposal is.
Yeah, so I think we have a motion that was there's a motion on the table, right?
Yes, I motion to.
I think it's a little bit complicated. I think you have to say to direct district staff to seek professional services.
So the only thing that's on the table that we're asking for clarity on or direction is that, do you want us to pursue an investigation as to the feasibility of this? That's what we're not moving ahead with a project yet, but we were asked to bring a preliminary, which is all this is. So if you're making a motion, it's probably a motion for staff to allocate resources to hire consultants to do a feasibility study of the project.
I make that motion.
I second it.
I'll second it.
Okay.
And my rationale is that I think the prudent and appropriate thing to do would be first is to compare it to the alternative uses for that capital and decide whether this is the best thing to do a feasibility study for versus the other potential things. Because there will be a cost involved of that, and there will be an escalation of commitment, and you're just going to move down that path. And so I'm all for getting more information and ultimately potentially deciding to do this, but I think that it's an appropriate thing to sort of question whether there are other things that could more favorably impact the district and ultimately our students and employees than this. That's the only question. And if I had the information that said this is the best use of that stuff, then of course we should go forward and do the feasibility studies. But I'd rather not do, feasibility studies without knowing that that's what we want to be.
And to that point, I'm going ahead with this, and Tim have gone ahead with this because it was on the table already, because the board, certainly prior to yours or my or Trustee Mudd's arrival, sounds like they had that debate and actually put it on the ballot for voters. I'm not quite sure how to. That's the part that I'm saying I'm not quite sure how to figure that out. So I can do like the evaluation and give you like what the scope would be and the cost and the feasibility. I can't make the decision for the board. That really is a board decision of, yes, this is still a priority, and whatever the scope is, we either do or do not want to spend the resources because this is a priority for us. That's very specifically a board decision. If you want to help me with thoughts of how to get that conversation going, I can certainly try, but I'll just need some more input to help on that, because you're right, you are a fiduciary. That's one of the main responsibilities of a board member, and I want you to have the information that you need to make the decision. I think
that's fair. That's rational. So like, at least from my perspective, the thing that would help me is to just like get that additional information about like what are the other potential things, and sort of like what is the, what does that sort of like decision tree and sort of like, trade-offs look like. And that would either probably paint a picture that says this is actually the highest return way for us to positively impact the district over time. And if that is what the data says and the sort of discussion produces, then that's fine. And I just, from a procedural standpoint, just from my, like, again, I don't have the benefit as Trustee Wong, Kendall, and Reed have of sort of maybe some of the longer dated historical discussions. But that is for my personal understanding. I cannot in good faith say this is a thing that like I feel confident that we should move forward in, because I just don't have the information that demonstrates to me that this is like the way forward. And that's all it is. Like, it's not that it's definitively not, I just don't.
I hear what you're saying. I might just need more information to get you the information. So the only thing that it would impact is if we dedicate bond funds to it, because then it would take the place of something else in one of the bond tranches, right? So that discussion in December, when we look at the tranches, you'll be able to clearly see, and I'm sure Tim can send you the list of tranches as they currently exist, what's been completed and what's next up in order, so that you can see, what was already established by the master plan as the order of priorities for the district. And then that gives you some perspective. And then I will also talk to the folks that we engage with, if that's what the will of the board is, to say, what are the impacts that have been demonstrated, positive and negative, for not just districts, but community colleges that have done this. And then if you have other ideas, I'm happy to pursue them. I really am. I just am going to need a bit more.
Does that capture what you need, Deepak?
Yeah.
What you think? Okay.
So I know you have a first and second on the, there's a first and second on the floor, but that means discussion can continue. I don't want folks to not have the opportunity to ask anything. So
I just wanted to have the motion had started, so I wanted to have that on the floor.
It has,
that was the discussion time. So we are doing that. Yeah. Okay, so Deepak, do you have other, or anyone else, any other discussion? We have not taken a vote.
In theory, does this, at some point, not initially, but at some point, we pay off the cost of this. It is a rental. I know we would be renting it at below market rate, but at some point, we'd also be producing some sort of revenue on this, right?
Well, I think that what they're saying is they're at the limit of, need more to bring in more expertise to answer some of these types of questions, like the long-term plan impacts, and
we're just voting right now on if we're going forward
right,
or not.
because we need to have more information, and it's the only way to get it, right?
No, I completely understand. I just wanted to add that bit in, just in
strategically, yes, it's a very long-term concept, Trustee Mudd, but the idea is that yes, once you pay off the asset and you're just maintaining it, you develop a new revenue stream for the entity that builds. But you're right, that's a very long-term look, but long-term planning is also good. So
yeah, there are a whole lot of different approaches to this.
There are.
Any issue. Okay.
And I guess just to be clear, you're asking, Chris, for the ability to collect RFPs for the professional stuff, or to proceed with the studies?
So we're asking for planning permission tonight. We need to investigate and hire people that know more about this. So the RFPs would come to the board because they're contracts. So once we gather RFPs, typically the process is that like, let's say that the RFP generates 3 different proposals. So Tim and typically a couple of board members, typically the owner committee, where they would evaluate the proposals, they would watch a presentation and they would select a finalist, and that finalist would generate a contract which would come to the board for approval. So yeah, even that requires a process. So this is not a fast process. We're just asking for permission to move ahead with it because we don't explicitly have that yet.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that we could parallel process, right? You can request RFPs, and at the same time, we can review additional information to just try to, ensure that it makes sense to ultimately accept one of those proposals, so that we may actually be in a point where we actually do accept one of those proposals. But if it turns out that, that information suggests something else, we can have a discussion at that point. But rather than sort of hold it up, it seems like it's okay. It would be okay to proceed with collecting RFPs, because we're not actually, accepting money and expending, funds on those studies until we actually approve one of them.
Right, we'd have to approve the contract.
Correct. Yeah, and the RFP would be going through Fund 21, so it would be going through your construction program. And yeah, so that would be the process. The other thing that might help bring clarity is at the December board study session, when you actually see the tranches and the cost of everything laid out with escalation, so you can see what the opportunity cost would be for putting something in versus something else, what those things would be. And that's going to be in December, probably about the same time that we should be able to get just an RFP together and not even get responses to it yet, to be honest with you. But
okay, so do we have any more discussion before we take a vote? Are we good? Okay. All in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed? Okay, was that all ayes then?
As I understand it, to collect the RFPs, aye. Yes.
Aye. Okay. Okay, motion is passed.
great, thank you for the direction.
Okay, you have what you need. Okay, so then we're moving on to 16.1, Juneteenth. And this is you again, Superintendent.
Sorry, I've lost my agenda.
Oh, that's okay. So it's
I've been staring
Juneteenth.
at it screens too much. Let me see if I can find my way back. It's thank you for your patience. So item number 16.1 is the Juneteenth holiday. And the recommendation is that it's recommended the Board of Trustees approve adding Juneteenth as a holiday for the Burlingame School District and its employees. And of course, background to this, if folks weren't watching the news this past year, On June 19th, 1865, General Gordon Granger arrived with Union soldiers in Galveston, Texas, and announced to enslaved African Americans that the Civil War had ended and that they were free more than 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. At the time Lincoln issued the proclamation, there were minimal Union troops in Texas to enforce it, but with the surrender of Confederate General Robert E. Lee 2 months earlier and the arrival of Granger's troops, the Union forces were now strong enough to enforce the proclamation. The holiday, which gets its name from the combination of June and 19th, was passed as a national federal holiday on June 16th of this year, so just recently. The June 19th holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the US is already celebrated as a state or ceremonial holiday in 47 states and the District of Columbia. And when President Biden signed the bill on June 19th became the country's 11th federal holiday. So we're asking recognition of that 11th official federal holiday. Obviously, it was passed a little too late and the school year had ended this past year. So we're bringing it to you after the fact, which means that we would add it to the district's holiday calendar for 2022.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to approve adding Juneteenth as a holiday for the Burlingame School District and its employees. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Oh, go ahead. Kate, second it.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I just think it's great that we're doing this, and I'm really happy to see it on the agenda this month.
It's interesting. I don't know if anybody watches the news. I tend to be a little bit of a news junkie. So there is another federal holiday that is being proposed as of today. And that's going to be Election Day is now being debated. So what a couple of years that we're suddenly getting new federal holidays. It's been a while. So Juneteenth was certainly a milestone. So thank you.
All right. So we have a motion on the table. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous. Great.
Great. And 16.2 is School Board Association nominations for directors at large. This is completely optional and voluntary. We do put the motion on the table. So CSBA directors at large get involved more in the political action as well as organization of the School Boards Association of California. We have had trustees in the past that are very interested in this aspect of school boards in the state and are active at the county level as well as the statewide directors at large concept. It is not a requirement, but we do annually put it on the board agenda to see if there are any trustees that are interested in being nominated to the statewide California School Boards Association as a director at large.
Is anyone wanting to be nominated? Okay, I think we can move on to the next item.
Was that the definition of crickets right there? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
I'm not,
So,
unless my connection's not working.
I don't think any of us qualify for this at-large position, so.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to.
We still bring them all. I agree with you, but human resources, Ms. Bell.
Yes, thank you. So I have two voting items tonight. My first one, it is my intention to recommend that the board approve the provisional internship permit for Faraz Davalu for the 21-22 school year. Currently, Faraz is pursuing his single subject credential. He will be teaching the humanities course at Burlingame Intermediate. He will be able to qualify for an intern credential for the fall of 2022, but he is not able to qualify for it this year. So the provisional internship permit will be a bridge document until he is eligible. So the CTC, the Commission on Teaching Credentialing, allows a district to request a provisional internship permit for such an applicant as long as a notice of intent to employ the named employee is identified, the position, and has been made public at the request and was acted upon favorably by the board.
Great. Do we have any questions for Allison?
I know the answer to this, Allison, but I just want to ask to put it out there in public.
Sure.
When we're making these recommendations to approve, these candidates do have their bachelor's and they're just going now and getting their credentialing, correct?
Correct. So we use a lot of these kind of typical internship permits and waivers and things like that when we have a hard time recruiting fully credentialed employees. For instance, Faraz has actually been a substitute within our district for quite a few years. Great reputation with every school site that he's been with, and he has flourished in the first 3 weeks. He's at BIS, and the students and the staff love him. And so we're very happy to have been able to provide him with such an opportunity. A lot of our employees who take advantage of this kind of tend to stay with us for a couple of years because they've gained the ground to kind of learn and do their student teaching kind of almost early. So yes, he does have his bachelor's degree. He is currently in a single subject credential program.
Great.
Okay, of course. So my next voting item is,
but we didn't.
I'm sorry.
You need that one
think we
first.
have to-
There you go. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the provisional internship permit?
I'll make a motion to approve 17.1 approval of provisional internship permit for Faraz W or W? W.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Lisa and Kate. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. And then item 17.2, again, you. Allison?
Yes. And so this one is for approval of a short-term staffing permit for one of our formerly permanent subs, Dolores Gonzalez. So it is recommended that the board approve the short-term staffing permit for Dolores, who is currently pursuing her multiple subject credential at the University of San Francisco. She has been working in the district as a permanent sub for 2 years. Dolores has built a positive reputation in the district community, especially in the dual language program. However, Miss Dolores is not able to apply for the intern credential, which requires recommendation by the teacher preparation program. So she needs 1 semester before she qualifies for the internship permit. And so upon the board's approval, we are going to be able to allow her a short-term staffing permit until the spring of 2022.
Any questions for Allison on this one? All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 17.2, approval of short-term staffing permit for Dolores Canizales.
Do we have a second? Thanks, Kate. A second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Lisa. All in favor? Aye.
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 Great.
Thank you.
Now we're on item 18, which is public statements related to non-agenda topics. Kirsten, do we have any such statements?
No, we do not, President Kendall.
Thank you. So then we'll move on to item 19. I think that there's the workforce housing. Maybe we want to change that a little bit since we're already talking about it. But does anyone have anything they would like to add to the board requested items? Okay, we already have a full slate there.
That's good.
Okay, great. So then we move on to item number 20, which is adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Why, thanks.
Second.
Oh, thanks, Florence. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Good to see you guys. Have a great evening.
Good to see you
Ready
all.
to take care.
Aye.